Hi students, welcome to class. Please take a moment to read the bell work. The first thing you need to do is make sure that your phone and other personal electronic devices are in your backpack. Backpacks need to be on the floor, and the materials that you need today are a pencil, your iPad, your notes, and headphones. For your expectations, please listen carefully to these. Keep your phones and other personal electronic devices in your backpack during class. After one warning, the sub will call for security to take your phone or personal electronic device to your administrator. Sit in your assigned seat. The sub has the seating chart. You need to be in the correct spot. Collaboration spaces may not be used. The sub knows this. Do not ask to use them. No passes to work outside the classroom. This includes admin, counselors, library, and resource room. None of the work being completed warrants the use of these spaces. The sub knows this. Do not ask. Restroom maximum time is 7 minutes. Sign out, sign in, and leave your phone. Clean up after yourself. Do not leave messes behind. And finally, be responsible, be accountable, and be responsible. Your learning goal today is I can learn the impact of total war, and I can learn how peace treaties were used to restore the lives of those impacted by total war. Your success criteria is I will be successful when I have my notes, map, and video answers complete. When we are discussing the impacts, the consequences of total war, we have a list of about 5 things that we have to look at to fully understand those impacts. The first thing that we have to look at is the increase of government powers. If you remember from a few lessons ago, we spoke about how war used to only last a few weeks. It wasn't a drawn out thing that lasted for months or years. Because of this, the government had to step in and respond quickly to the conflict. This meant that there was going to be a mass gathering or mobilization of men and resources. That is what was needed for war. The next impact we have to look at is the economic impact. The economy used to be capitalist in many areas. However, with the war happening, we have to shift to something called a planned economy. That means that the government is going to have control over prices, wages people earned, rent, food rations, and materials. So, in this instance, you wouldn't be able to go to the store like Walmart or Target and buy things like your groceries or your food. It would be rationed out for you. If you needed materials that were heavy with like steel, iron, anything chemicals, they probably would have restricted those or made something else that was similar to it. We are also going to see that imports and exports are going to be heavily regulated. Some things that used to be imported, they may not get anymore because they need it for the war effort. And they also may not be able to export goods to other countries because they need those as well. We are also going to see that transportation systems and those industries are going to be limited. The next impact is going to be the blurred lines between who was considered military and who was considered a civilian. All citizens were considered part of the national army. Those lines were blurred because of the mass gathering, the total war, the mobilization of groups of people. Everyone was working toward the war effort. Even if you are at home, you have a job, you are now working toward the war effort. The next impact is going to be the high amount of people that opposed the war. Many people by 1916 were completely done with how their lives had been flipped upside down. The government did respond to this opposition. In Germany, Russia, and Austria-Hungary, those governments used authoritarian regimes and force to control their people. We know from our last lesson that Russia was experiencing a civil war. We are also going to see that democratic states like Great Britain, they're going to use special police forces. They're going to expand the role of the police to arrest protesters, and those protesters were considered traitors. Along with this, we are going to see propaganda. Propaganda was used by the government to try to maintain war enthusiasm. They wanted people to keep their morale up. They wanted people to be enthusiastic about the war. On the other side of this, newspapers and any publications that were talking negatively about the war, they would be censored. So, this is going to be an example where we see somebody's freedom of speech being censored by the government so the government can produce their agenda. Some of the propaganda that you may know of is that picture of Uncle Sam saying, "I want you to join the US Army." I will also put a few photos of propaganda up here. We are now going to look at the impact on society. The first impact is going to be the casualties. We are going to see 16 million military personnel and civilians die by 1918. Many are going to return home wounded. And on top of that, later in 1918, the Spanish flu pandemic is going to come in and kill an estimated 50 million people worldwide. We are seeing a devastating blow to the population. We are going to see women's roles change. When men went to the front lines, there were a ton of unfilled jobs. Women filled those jobs previously unavailable to them. Those things are going to be, quote, men's work, such as sweeping chimneys, driving trucks, being farm laborers, and just involved in heavy industry. However, after the war, those jobs ended up becoming temporary fills. The government removed a lot of women from their positions, and women that stayed in job positions ended up getting a wage reduction. On the positive side, we are going to see that a year later in 1919, in the United States, women are going to gain the right to vote, and the right to vote is also going to be achieved in Germany, Austria, and Britain for women. The last impact on society that we have to look at is refugees. Millions of civilians ended up being displaced from their homes. Refugees were created in France, Belgium, Germany, Russia, Poland, and Siberia. Some of them were unable to return home, and many of them did not survive the aftermath of war. When we are discussing peace, we are going to start with the Paris Peace Conference that happened at the start of 1919. This had 27 allied nations meet together for their goals to change of what they wanted to see at the end of the war. At first, they wanted to see territory gains, which means some people wanted to have land back. However, it started to shift for more idealistic reasons. The first person and our main player here is going to be Woodrow Wilson in his 14-point speech. One of his biggest points that he made in his speech was that they should not punish who is ever at fault too hard because it may come back and bite them later in a future war. Some other points that he made was that any agreement that is made in the future needs to be open. There's no secrets. Everybody's military needs to be reduced and weapons need to be reduced. And there also needs to be self-determination for European states. That means that each group has their own country to live in. He pushed for democratic nations and saying that they need a General Association of Nations, which is later going to be called the League of Nations. So who are our big three players? Our first group that we are going to look at is France. France essentially wanted Germany to be punished. They wanted them to have reparations for war costs. They wanted them to have a disarmed army, and they also wanted a separate buffer state, which is going to be called the Rhineland. This is just going to be a place where Germany and France do not touch. It's that little yellow polka dotted piece on the map that is kind of a buffer, so they don't touch. Our next person is going to be from Britain, and they basically say the same thing. The Germans have to pay, make Germany pay. However, we know Wilson does not agree with that. He wants international cooperation, and again, he also wants to create something called the League of Nations. So what is going to be kind of our compromise and settlement? Well, Wilson's going to get what he wants. There is a League of Nations created. Some compromises that Wilson makes is that territorial arrangements are going to be used in exchange for his support in the League of Nations. What this means is, though Wilson thought of the idea of League of Nations and wanted to have a space for the nations to meet, he wasn't actually going to join it. He was just going to create it and then never join it. On the last slide, I mentioned something about Woodrow Wilson wanting self-determination for different European nations and states. So what does this actually compromise itself of? This is going to be European territorial changes. Germany and Russia are going to lose a lot of their territory. The Austrian-Hungarian Empire is going to completely dissolve, and we are going to see some new nations. Some of those nations that you may recognize today are Finland, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and of course, as separate, Austria and Hungary. We are still going to see challenges to this self-determination. Just because every country has its own group of people with their own nationalism doesn't mean that challenges won't come with it. There was ethnic complexity. It was impossible to draw strict ethnic borders. They still had minority problems. Almost every new state and country contained ethnic minorities. There were population transfers. There was forced relocation of those ethnic minorities. And there were future conflicts because of those new boundaries and ethnic tensions. Where other countries are going to get involved is the mandate system. The mandate system was created in the Treaty of Versailles, which basically means that Allied powers are going to supervise German colonies in former Ottoman territories. So, this is going to break up some of the Arabian states. The concept of this mandate system is a temporary governance system by the League of Nations. So again, the mandate system is temporary. France is going to get Syria to look after. Britain is going to get Iraq and Palestine to look after. So the Treaty of Versailles is going to look at who is at fault. And according to the War Guilt Clause, that is going to place the fault on Germany and Austria. So what are the punishments for starting the war? Germany has to pay for all damages that happened to Allied countries. Germany is also getting a large military restriction. Their army is reduced to 100,000 men. Their navy is cut back, and they are not allowed to use air force. It's completely eliminated. Some of their territory is going to be changed. Last unit, we looked at how France gave Alsace and Lorraine, two of their states, to Germany. However, Germany now has to return those back. And finally, the Rhine River location, so on the Rhineland, that has to be completely demilitarized. Germany saw this as too harsh. They said, is it peaceful? Sure, but it is very harsh. They were very angry over the War Guilt Clause, and they very reluctantly accepted this peace agreement despite being outraged. So what are the long-term consequences of total war? Well, we're going to see that society is destructed. A lot of people's belief in the government and their value and their trust in the government is going to be severely altered. What was supposed to be a few-week war is now lasting years. 16 million deaths happened from the war, and that's not even counting the 50 million that happened from the Spanish flu. Veterans are going to return mentally and physically injured. Another long-term consequence is going to be the expansion of the government authority. The government has increased power over the citizen's life during war. We saw that freedom of speech was limited in some areas for people speaking out against the war. And we're also going to see that the seeds are going to be planted for future instability. A lot of these upheavals are creating new problems. There is no normal to return to. Because the United States decided that they were just going to help with some territory agreements and not join the League of Nations, the international cooperation is weakened. We are seeing ethnic tensions created in some of these newer states. And Germany is very resentful over these harsh terms. After you are completed with your notes, you will be clicking the next button to complete a video. This video has questions with it. Please answer the questions. Once you finish the video, you will click next again, and it will take you to a PowerPoint that has the other side of the map that we completed before spring break. This is going to be the 1918 side. Please color and label that map accordingly. Whenever you finish that map, please turn your notes and the map into the substitute.